Good evening all and welcome. Tonight I have a chilling collection of night shift stories for you to enjoy. So get comfortable and let the darkness take control. I'm working the graveyard shift, and after doing my round check I sit down. My station is situated in an open-planned foyer with the lounge to the front, the lift on my left, and the dining hall to my right with conjoining hallways connecting all areas, with me at the center, so I have a really good 180-degree view if anything happens. A few minutes have passed and the lights go out one by one as their motion censored. Now it's dark, and I am occupied with my K-drama. The sound of the lift ding doors opening, and I see the lights flicking from the lift on and off, but no one exits, and where I'm sitting I can see the reflection of the inside from the glass wall across it. The empty doors were closing, and I continued with my K-drama series. Now the lights in the hallway never go off completely, they just dimmer. As odd as it seems, the lights appear to brighten, then dimmers from one bulb to the next, coming down the hallway towards the open area where I am, then stops and resumes to normal. At first I thought the light bulb might need changing, but the pattern at which they brighten and dimmer seems very unusual. I took no notice after and continued as I was. Later that night on the other side, the dining hall is dark, but the hallway connecting to the dining hall from my view, that light is getting bright. It brightened coming towards the dining hall. It's hard not to notice. Then it stopped. I did investigate, but everything was normal. The lights were operational, and no one was around. Or so I thought. I had a funny feeling. At that moment, it gave me goosebumps, and it stopped me in my tracks. I felt as if there was something down the hallway behind me staring in my direction. Truly, I didn't want to turn around, but I did, and saw a small thing. The height of a child, walking the corner into the connecting hallway. I was curious, and surely there shouldn't be any kids on the premises, so I power walked in its direction and turned the corner, to find no one. I walked back to my station but turned all the surrounding lights on before sitting, so that I could feel assured that I'm okay. I just needed to feel like it was daytime for a bit with the lights on. The room starts going dark again. I look down to my phone, and in my peripheral vision to my right, I sense something standing at least a few feet away from me. It feels really close to me. In the darkness, close enough that I'm starting to feel scared. My eyes turn, but my head is still facing down towards the screen of my phone, and then I hear, "Hi," whispered. It turned completely into its direction, and whatever it was literally disappeared down the hallway faster than I could make it out, and be faster than the light before it sensed my movement. Now I'm feeling scared, trying to understand what had occurred. Something was there. It said hi, but the light did not turn on until I stood up. Literally just seconds after processing everything in my mind. At the corner of my table, a child's head peeked up, only revealing the top of its head and two eyes, and just stared at me. I could still feel its big eyes, lifeless skin with short, curly, red-brown hair. I lost my cool. I took the emergency exit stairs down and ran to another floor where another colleague was. I explained to her and she looked at me. "Oh, you must be new. Your first time?" Now, I don't want to go into detail of what happened, but my colleague explained that paranormal phenomena happens on this premises all the time, and it always happens to newcomers, like it was a normal thing. As you can imagine, I didn't wish to stay long at that job after that. I have a side job as a security guard, where I do a night shift once a week. Once a month we have a meeting with the other guards. We work in a school with approximately 100 students. It's a 2-story building with a patio, and on this specific day, we had a meeting just before my shift. It was business as usual, camera maintenance, discussion of work-related situations, some jokes at the end, and as everyone was leaving, a piece of the office ceiling fell. It was odd, but nothing too strange. I managed to put it back together when my shift started and carried on. As expected, it was quiet after the others left, and I noticed that the music player we always kept on was off. For clarification, it's a habit that one of our colleagues has, and we just go along with it. It's kind of a feng shui thing. He insists on keeping this small MP3 player in our office, always playing classical music at a low volume, and we respect that only he touches it. And I swear it's always on, but this night it was off. I decided to investigate and switched it back on. It was a little dark because I had turned off most of the lights, so it was hard to see if the MP3 player's visor was on or not. I leaned in to check, and suddenly, the MP3 player started to play Wagner really loud. I got scared. I jumped. It was a true jump scare. It's one of those nights, I thought, after taking a breath. I took some time to look through the cameras, watching the neighborhood slowly disperse. The office is on the second floor, and we can see the street as well. Nothing unusual beside the feeling of being watched. I shrugged it off and went about my activities, drinking coffee, watching the cameras, reading a book. 2 a.m, time for my round. The lights are off, everything is dark, and I'm instructed to keep it that way. I step out into the office and begin to walk through the hallway. It's normal to hear some creaking in the building, but this time there was a creak following me through the hallway. It wasn't from the ceiling, the floor, or anywhere else. It was right beside my ears or behind my head, along with the already mentioned feeling that someone or something was following me. I looked around, but there was only darkness. It followed me through the classrooms, creaking close around me all the way to the door that leads to the first floor. The stairway is open. The creaking stops, but not the feeling. I make my way through the patio, heading to the door that leads back into the building, and the creaking starts again. The balcony smells like something is rotting, but I look around and there's no sight of food or bugs. I even check the trash cans. Nothing. The cafeteria had the same smell, but not as intense, as there was no physical evidence of it. Creaking, creaking, creaking. As soon as I get to the workshop in the back, something falls in the dark. I shine my flashlight in the direction of the noise and see some scrap metal on the floor, but I don't know what caused it to fall. All this time, I'm trying to breathe steadily and keep myself calm. I was not only afraid but angry. By this time, I wanted to face whatever was bothering me. Last stop, the warehouse. Let's see if the brooms are okay. I open the door and a broom falls, turning the light switch on, which I immediately turn off. I was angry. If it wanted light, I wanted the dark. I make my way back to the office and realize the creaking has stopped, and I felt that I was alone. The night remained calmed after that. I'm not sure what happened, but that's it. Another strange day at work. I used to work the evening shift in a historic castle in England. It was my duty to clean up after all the guests had gone. The castle itself is hundreds of years old, with a very interesting history which I won't bore you with now. My experience happened a few months into the role. I had usually been doing the ground floor cleaning, but on this particular occasion, I was asked to do the top floor. Now, when visitors come to the castle, they follow an allocated route, which is signposted, and that is the area that we had to do the cleaning for. I made my way to the top floor, got my cleaning supplies, and started vacuuming the carpet in one particular room. It was probably around 8 p.m. at this point. I was nearly done with my tasks and really wanted to get home. One of the things I usually do is close the door to a room I have cleaned, so that way I know not to go back in, or anyone else, until the morning shift comes and opens the doors. I had just finished a particular room, was retrieving my stuff from it, and was just about to close the door when from my peripheral vision I saw someone inside the door. Naturally, I was a bit creeped out. I had just cleaned the room, it was empty, and I hadn't left the room at all, so I knew I was there the whole time. I pushed the door back open and see a woman in a long green dress with lots of ruffles and interesting details walk across the floor. She made her way to where the door was on the other side of the room, which led to an adjoining bathroom, and vanished straight through it without even touching the door. I looked on in horror, rubbed my eyes as to what I had just seen. This apparition had come and gone in the space of about a second and a half, and I was unsure if I was just exhausted and imagining things. So I calmly closed the door, carried on my tasks, and tried to think nothing of it. A few months had passed, and the person who worked upstairs had left, and her replacement had been found. Another young lady, who was very adept at cleaning and faster than most of us. One day I hear her shriek, and it's a really loud shriek because this castle is big, and for me to hear her from all the way downstairs was an accomplishment. So of course, me and some of the other cleaners run upstairs to see what's wrong. Me and two of my colleagues find her crumpled in a heap on the floor. We ask her what's wrong, and between sobs, she relays a story of how she was cleaning the same room I was cleaning a few months prior, and she saw the apparition of a woman float through the room and through the door. And once she regained some composure, I asked her if she noticed what color dress the apparition was wearing. She tells me they were wearing a green dress. Dread intensifies in my stomach, because I knew at that moment what I had seen was not in my mind at all, but something very real. As I was walking to the exit after work, I catch up with this woman, and I tell her my story and that she isn't alone, and that I'm probably not the first person to see it either. She feels immense comfort knowing that she isn't the only one, but that she's going to see if she can continue her employ under these spooky circumstances. She stuck around for a few months and then left, but if it was the phantom apparition that caused her to want to leave, I can't say for sure. This first story happened when I was beginning at this job. One of the older guards, called Anthony, was showing the ropes to me and another colleague called John. We were halfway through a shift, 11 p.m. to 5 a.m., and having a snack together in our office. This was nice because we got to know one another, which makes this job easier in a lot of ways. All of a sudden, we heard a noise coming from the hallway, like someone was walking towards our office. Clear footsteps. We all heard it, but to the cameras the hallway was empty. So John decided to check it out. He stepped out of the office into the darkness of the hallway. The sound of footsteps stopped, and John also stopped and felt something in his pockets. He grabbed it and came back with a keychain. It looked like a set of older keys from the building because it had the same type and number of keys. But the shape of them wasn't the same. We even tested the keys without success. We still don't know what to make of it. The other one happened during a round through the school. It was almost a year after this. I was just beginning my rounds, lights out except from the office, but at the end of the damn hallway I saw something. I could see something circular the size of a soccer ball. It was very dark, but I could see this black on black thing moving beside the wall. It reminded me of that bacteria or cell, but black. I didn't switch on my flashlight because I was afraid that it would go away, so I did what any human would do. I tried to touch it, and to my surprise I received an electric shock, just like I had accidentally touched a power outlet. I decided to leave it and continue my job. I don't know what you guys will make of it, I'm just telling you what I went through. I don't have any explanation for those things, and just saying this out loud made me realize that everything happened in the hallway. Let me know what you think. I used to work night security, which was a very boring job, for a big building in a city I'd rather not name. I worked there for a number of years and had my routine set up. I'd start at around 10 PM and be relieved at 6 AM. Every hour or so I'd make my way around the building just to make sure no one was in there, and while I wasn't doing that, I kept an eye on the cameras. Or that's what I was supposed to do anyway. There was also a guard on the bottom floor, by the front desk, who was situated there all night. I didn't really interrupt them and just did my own duties. In theory, they're the first line of defense, and if anyone tries to break in, they call the police. Who would want to break into this particular big office building in the middle of this big city? I would never guess. It wasn't of any particular interest or anything. Now here's the thing. I was a bit naughty when it came to my job, as I didn't take it so seriously. I had a bad habit of gaming well into the day, which is when I was supposed to be sleeping, and was usually quite tired when it came to my job. I sometimes had long naps and neglected certain duties, not that anything ever happened in this building, but it's important to the story. I had just dozed off, and it was about 4 AM at this point. Sweet, 2 hours left. I had got paid and slept about 4 hours on the job. I was feeling pretty good about myself. The moment I start rubbing my eyes, I see something from the dark corridor just a bit further from where I'm sitting. There's a door with a glass window separating me and this figure. Instantly, I just about drop a brick into my pants. What the hell is this thing? Has it been watching me? Is it an intruder? My thoughts instantly flickered to the person downstairs, and if they let someone in because they noticed me slacking? What if it was someone taking pictures of me asleep on the job? The fear intensifies, and I grab my flashlight, stand up, and turn it on and make my way towards this figure. I open the door, and a few steps in, I realize something is terribly wrong with this situation. This figure, or being, isn't a person at all, but it is person-shaped, and it appears to be made of, well, scribbles, like a child's drawing come to life. I'm temporarily stunned, as I don't really know how to proceed with this information, when before my very eyes the figure blinks out of existence as if it was never there. I blink a few times myself, wondering what the hell had happened, and decide this would be a perfect time to go on the route and make sure that everything's in order and try and clear my head a bit. I will call around the building, make a more thorough examination than necessary and more than I'd probably had done in years, and make my way down to the bottom and speak to the guard who was just casually on his phone. I chat with him for a bit and make my way back upstairs to my little control room. I start looking up on the internet about these scribble people and get a few results, and I'm relieved to realize I'm not the only one. Nonetheless, I try and tell myself it was probably just the remnants of a dream, and that it was my subconscious or whatever. I don't want to think it was anything spooky or paranormal, but nonetheless it really freaked me out. If anyone has a better explanation for what this thing is, I would love to hear it. I'm a shift manager at a gas station. I'm a woman in my 20s who's 5'0", and I get the attention of all sorts of creepy men in the middle of the night. One time I was talking to a customer, asking him how he was, and he begins to tell me about a fight he had with his girlfriend. I honestly don't care, but I'm in customer service all day, so I sit and listen, or better yet, stand and listen. I gave him some advice and sent him on his way, considering it's about 2 AM. I didn't really think much of it, considering it's a common occurrence and there's nothing I can really do. For the next 3 nights, this man, who before the first initial night came into my store I had never met, showed up and would not leave without a full conversation. Mind you, this is during the times we live in today, so I'm not really trying to stand and talk to someone less than 6 feet away for more than 15 minutes. Despite it being the middle of the night, there is still a lot of work to be done. I'm on the 4th night, and I'm outside changing the trash bags in the gas station trash cans, as well as the ones directly out front. Next thing you know, there's that dude, the same one over the last few days. He starts a conversation with me, which is whatever. But whenever I try to lose them by turning the corner and collecting the bag for the next trash can, he follows me very closely. Then he tries to get me to look at something inside of his car. Eventually, I signaled my cashier through my eyes that I'm uncomfortable. Beforehand, we had talked about this guy because this is not a unique situation at all. So she eventually comes out and says that my other person needs to help me doing whatever, and I say my goodbye to the dude and I go back inside, which he did not follow me back into. The next day, we're looking out for this guy, and how damn creepy he is. Throughout the whole night, he didn't show up, which is awesome, but at 6 AM, right before I was leaving and handing the keys off to the next manager, that same manager called me saying that there's a call for me. I'm not the only manager there, so they had to have known my name and asked for me specifically. I answer the phone. "Thank you for calling. This is Cassandra. How may I help you?" "I've been a regular customer of yours for a while now, and I'm calling to ask if I can go down on you if I give you 500. "What?" The guy repeats the same thing, and I hang up. In shock, I turn to my boss and relay the information. My boss, a middle-aged white guy, goes, 500? You can get way more than that." Needless to say, I don't work there anymore. My first job out of high school was working for a security company in my area. The place I worked was an old carpet factory that was being used as a warehouse now, and I worked the third shift. The job was super easy, since it was a warehouse and there were no employees, so at night I was the only person on site. The place was known by other guards for being weird and for having paranormal activity. The area it was on and the building itself have experienced countless amount of deaths. It was built on an old Civil War battle group, and the building was at least 70 years old and had at least 10 people die there, all in gruesome ways. I've experienced many unbelievable things there. When making rounds, all we had to do was walk inside along the main wall, leaving the same door we entered through. One area I always pass was a door that led you to a single set of concrete stairs to a big empty room, used by maintenance when it was operational. The door was always left open because after years the concrete floor had shifted and you would have to force the door to get it closed. There were drag marks on the ground from where the door would dig into the concrete when it moved. One day, while making a round, I passed it and it was open. As we walked along the wall on the opposite end of the building, I heard a huge slam that echoed throughout the building. I walked back around and saw that the door had been forced shut. Another time, as I walked through the shipping, I had to walk through a pathway of stacked boxes that was around 6 feet tall and 15 feet long on both sides. As I walked through it at the end, a black figure around 3 foot tall crossed from left to right in front of me. I looked around and couldn't see any animal, and there were no footprints in the dirt around the area. Another time, I started my round and entered a big empty part of the warehouse and could hear what sounded like multiple people talking back and forth, having a conversation, but I couldn't make out what they were saying. I didn't think anything about it at first. It didn't hit me until a little later that it was 3 in the morning and that no one should be in there. I went back and didn't hear anything. I looked around and no one was there. I ran the security cameras and the place was completely empty. Around 10 years ago, I was working at a 24/7 IT help desk, doing an overnight shift. It was 3 AM and I go on break and head outside to have a smoke. I'm standing a few meters away from the building entrance in a mostly empty part of the large parking lot, as our building had around 300 employees working there during the day, but only a few of us at night. The lot had a few street lamps scattered about it, so I could see the whole space pretty clearly. I'm about halfway done with my cigarette, and in an instant the wind completely dies. The crickets stop chirping, the environment goes dead silent and completely calm. A few seconds later, I hear clear as day footsteps starting faintly from the empty section of the parking lot directly in front of me, walking towards me, getting louder. I'm in a well-lit, large empty area, and I can't see a damn thing. The footsteps get loud enough that it seems like whatever was making them should be 1 to 2 meters in front of me, but I can't see anything but empty space, so I nope out of there quickly. The whole experience only lasted about 10 to 15 seconds, and in the years I worked there, I never had anything like that happen again. My rational brain wants me to think it was a trick of the mind, and maybe it was. But if it was some kind of hallucination, I've never hallucinated like that before or since. What do you guys think? I work overnights as a janitor at an old abandoned gym that's being converted into a construction office/storage unit. So tonight I was working, and about 20 minutes or so into my shift, I hear a loud bang sound. It startles me a little, and I think nothing of it since it's storming really badly outside. I hear it again, and glass breaks at the same time, so I follow the noise and hear more loud banging and some screaming. I get closer, and I am led to a window in the back of the building. When I look outside and see someone outside the window, and the windows are tripled layered glass and one-way mirrors as well. He continues to hit the glass with a chunk of concrete, and the glass starts chipping into little square pieces as he screams. Then more manages to get through the first few layers of glass, and then he gets pissed off when he realizes there's still more glass to break through. I tell him to stop and leave or I'm calling the cops. He starts threatening me, saying something along the lines of that he'll bite my kneecaps off. Finally, I get the cops on the phone and tell them what's going on. I'm waiting by the window with a big-ass wrench in my hand, ready to swing it if he manages to come inside. Not even a few minutes later, the cops show up and have their guns pointed to him. They get him cuffed, and he tells them some wild story, saying that he owned the place and just happened to lose his keys. I was working the night shift at a seasonal job at a retreat on Star Island, in what's known as the Isle of Shoals. It's up on the border between Maine and New Hampshire. Literally, the border goes straight through the harbour. Star Island is owned by the Unitarian Universalists, which is a way of saying you're agnostic or atheist, but back when it wasn't okay to do so they made it look like some kind of church thing. Really, it's a big hippie getaway, but the actual Unitarian conference each year is only a small part of the actual season. The island is open to any group that wants to pay to organize the retreat there. At the time of this incident, we had 2 conferences on the island, a yoga retreat and a group of people who were into their 1920s. The latter group would hold swing dances and dress up in suits and things to match. Honestly, it was just historical cosplay. Working at night though, I never got to see them. The building that normally holds party-type events weren't the main hotel on the island called the Oceanic, so unless I was doing rounds to check that further side of the grounds, I never really went near the venues. But you'd see people trickle in and out, as most of them had rooms in the Oceanic, especially during a slow period. Only having 100 or so guests is actually pretty slow. The All-Star conferences held by the Unitarians get up to 500 people and the place is packed. So with that information out of the way, let's get to the story. The Oceanic is over 100 years old, and ghost stories have been floating around since it was built, and almost everyone who's ever worked there, especially on the top 2 floors, has at least one to share. My own mother even said she felt someone sit on her bed when she was completely alone in her room. That's actually pretty common. There's even a wing nicknamed Ghost Alley, but since it got renovated it's been quiet. So ghosts aren't exactly a new thing or even something someone would think is crazy. But as part of the night shift, I've never had to go up to the top 2 floors or any of the residences unless there was a fire, and there never has been. Part of my duties on night shift were to check the water supply for the Oceanic, which was fed from the island cistern through filters and stuff into these big tanks under the porch. These tanks held all the water from the main hotel, for toilets, sinks, showers, kitchens, drinking, snacks, bar, literally all the water. The water was stored in these huge tanks, and part of my job was to check them, write down how much water was left in them and at what time in case of a leak in the above-ground pipes, and flip the switches to draw power from a full tank if one got too low. The easiest way to access the door to the water storage was through the kitchen, which had a door leading out to the area of the island occupied by the other workers called pelicans. Guests aren't allowed back there. You won't get in trouble, but you are discouraged from going there because it's where most of us went to wind down, and it's not really a good place for guests to visit. So I was going through the dining hall to get into the kitchen, and I saw a man about 5'10", wearing a fancy looking jacket and button-down vest with a kind of bowler hat or some fancy shoes. He was an older gentleman, and my first thought was, okay, 1920s conference guest, but I noticed he was going through the open door to the kitchens where guests weren't allowed. I started walking faster to catch him up, saying, "Excuse me, sir, guests aren't allowed in the kitchen area," but when I reached the kitchen I couldn't see him. I thought perhaps he hadn't heard me. We get a lot of guests who are hard of hearing, so I went back out since that was the only place I could think he'd be. The two others were in a walk-in freezer and an office, and he was not the kitchen boss, so there was no way he'd be in there. I darted out back, trying to see if I could ask if he needed something, but couldn't find him. There's only one real spot on the island with vegetation cover, and that wasn't it. You really couldn't hide out there, it was bare rock. I thought maybe he'd loop around for some reason or I'd missed him by a second, and I asked some of the pelicans who were up late if they'd seen a guy like that, and they all said they hadn't seen anyone except me and my shift partner on our hourly rounds, so I shrugged it off and carried on with my duties. It was a cold night and I wanted to be out of the wind. When I got back to the desk, I asked my partner about the 20s conference, and he said they left that afternoon. Strange. Maybe this guy missed the boat and stuck around. It's not uncommon, because we do get some solos who just pay to stay for a long weekend. However, when the sun came up, and I turned the desk over to day shift, I went back through the kitchens to get downstairs and eat as much as I could before going to bed. On my way to the kitchen, I saw an old photograph on the lawn, the literal lawn area of the Oceanic, which has a bandstand and everything. It was a wide shot. It even showed the tiny, super old graveyard that's way to the right. I think some of the founders of the place are buried there. The graves are super old and eroded, but I kept looking at those graves because there was a man standing in the graveyard, a man who looked exactly like the man I had seen several hours ago. I honestly wasn't that freaked out. I was happy I had an answer to who I'd seen. I believe in ghosts, and that most of them are just visions of the past, like an old movie that plays randomly when things are just right. So I'd simply seen a replay of a man walking through the hotel and going through the kitchen when, maybe, the rules were a little looser. That was the only thing that I saw that summer, and it certainly made for a memorable paycheck. I used to work night shift at a gas station. It was quite late in the evening, and I was getting ready to pack things up for the night as it was 10, when this old lady wobbled in with a really rough-looking cane. She looked at me and asked if we had a specific item. I was rather taken aback by her request, as this is a gas station and we don't stock everything, but dutifully I informed her that I would ask my manager. So when I went to ask him if we stocked this particular item, I still can't remember what it was for the life of me, I was told no. And when I went back to tell her, she was gone. I'd asked if they'd seen her, and they told me they hadn't. The next day I was visiting my grandma, and she was showing me the obituaries, as one of them was a friend of hers. And among the list of the deceased was the spitting image of the woman who I saw in the gas station store yesterday. That's when I noticed the date printed on the obituary. It turns out this lady had died 2 months ago. I genuinely am curious, what her ghost was doing asking me for this random item, and I wonder if she'll ever come back or if it was a one-time thing. I once had a guy stalk me at my job. He would come in and ask for me. He looked me up on all my social media and asked extremely inappropriate questions, begging me for intercourse. After I told him to never speak to me again because he made me feel uncomfortable and didn't understand the word no, he started waiting in his car for me when I walked out of work at night. We left out of the fire escape door due to COVID. That's where our screening room was, and he would wait for me to come outside. I usually walked out alone, since I was the only one closing in my department at the time. I would usually have a 6'3", terrifying-looking asset protection guy walking me out, or 2 managers would walk me to my car. I bought pepper gel and a pocket knife that I kept on me at all times. One night there was no one to walk me out, so I walked out alone. This dude was waiting in his car like normal, and he started to get out of his car. I was terrified because there was no one out there either. Everyone else had left. I took out my pocket knife and flipped it open. It's a rainbow knife that is extremely sharp because I would sometimes use it at the job to open freight boxes. I was seriously prepared to end this guy if he came after me. I held it out where I'd be sure he could see it, and he closed his door and peeled out of the lot. I was so scared that he'd follow me home, and I weaved through the back roads until I made sure I wasn't being followed. Thankfully, I never saw him again after that. He never tried to contact me, and I no longer work at that job due to poor management. I now work at a nursing home close to the middle school in my town, which is nearer to my home. Hopefully I won't have to deal with creepy customers, just goofy old men, and I won't have to fear for my life anymore. We aren't allowed weapons of any kind at a nursing home, not even in our cars. Luckily, I usually am left alone, and the CNAs don't really pay attention to us laundry staff. A few years ago, I used to work at a popular fast food restaurant. There wasn't much activity, but I had 2 experiences, as I was working the closing shift one night when I had just finished handing out a drive-through order. To give you a quick layout, when you walk away from the drive-through area about 8 feet, you turn left and it's a straight 25 to 30 foot down the back door of the restaurant, passing the food prep area and dishes. Once you get to the back door, you can only turn right towards the back dry food storage room, which is pretty small. I started walking away from the window looking for my manager as I needed to ask her something. I turned the corner and start heading to the back to wash the dishes when out of my peripheral about 25 feet away, I saw someone walk from the back door to the back storage area. I thought, oh, it's my manager, let me ask her. I walked to the back and turned the corner, and no one's there. The only place to go is the roof, but no one ever goes up there, especially at night. I then realized I really only saw the mass of a person, but no color at all to insinuate they had clothes or anything. I walked back to the front and my manager was in her office the whole time. It wasn't super creepy, but it was definitely weird. There was another time I was closing with my friend and our manager. Our restaurant was under construction and they were remodeling the entire dining area, including the front counter section except the kitchen. So they added temporary walls behind our front counter to block off the entire construction area, and they only added a small door for us to access if needed. So we would not be able to see the dining area at all unless we opened the small door. Since we were the only open drive-through, it was super slow, and the dining area was pitch black, so I'm sure most people thought we were closed. All 3 of us were standing next to the manager office and talking, trying to pass the time, and it was really quiet as well. My manager was just about to start talking when we all heard 2 knocks coming from the dining area. We all just stared at each other and double-checked the drive-through window in case it was someone who came up to order. No one was there. My manager told my friend to go check it out, and my friend said, "Hell no, you go, you're the manager," and started laughing. He ended up checking and saw nothing or anyone outside. We were all a little spooked, but downplayed it to someone who probably went up to one of the windows to knock. I was working the night shift in a cinema. Although the cinema was and still is shiny, inviting and luring, when people visit I don't think they recall that where it is built was once a morgue for the bodies of people that were hanged just a few yards away. One night during closing shift, myself and around 7 other staff members did our normal screen, bathroom and confectionery checks to make sure all guests have exited. Each screen has nighttime CCTV, so it was pretty easy to spot anyone left behind. We were closing the main doors, and just as we were doing so, we heard a guest bathroom door give a long creak, as if someone was pushing it open slowly. We all looked at each other, assuming there was a guest in there, so myself and another staff member went to check it out. When we walked into the ladies' bathroom, all the loo doors were shut, bar the one at the very end, which was wide open. We checked it out and there was no one. We called building security to check the place out and it was confirmed there wasn't anyone. Very strange and very uncomfortable. Many scary things happened in that place, and I'm glad I no longer work there. In 2008, I was working in McDonald's and I was 17 years old, while cleaning the playpen with my shift manager who was also 17. No one else was in the entire lobby but us. Suddenly the music cuts off, and I hear what sounds like a little girl laughing, which then turns to crying, which then turns to screaming. I turn to my manager and she just says, "You heard that too?" Not a second later the music comes back on, but it's insanely loud, louder than we'd ever have it in the store. We both ran into the office. She checks the cams to see if someone maybe messed with the sound system, but no one stepped foot in the office for over an hour. Then we asked everyone behind the counter, and they said the music was fine and they didn't hear a thing. We just left it to the demon/ghost activity and asked to be taken off the night shift for a while. I worked at a gas station when I was 17 and was the only person on shift that night. A man came into the store wearing shorts and a jacket but no shirt. It was quite cold outside. He limped around the store muttering to himself, bought a coffee and told me to say hello to one of the regulars, let's call him Pam, and leaves. An hour later Pam came in, and when I was ringing up her items I told her that the guy says hello. She had a confused look on her face, so I tried describing the man to her. While I'm describing his face to her, she goes ghostly white, and I ask if she was okay. She says yes, but proceeds to pull out her phone and call her husband, and told him to lock the doors and call the cops and that she'd be home in 3 minutes, and rushed out. I don't know what happened after that, but it scared the crap out of me. I'm a manager for a restaurant that was built on land that used to be a military hospital. One night after I had finished all my closing duties, I was standing in the restaurant area waiting for my ride to come pick me up. It was dark and dead silent, and the next thing I know I see legs from just below the knee walk up to me. The pants were white and the shoes were high-polished military dress shoes. I look up and no one was there. Needless to say, I hightailed my ass out of that building and waited just outside the side door for my ride. Hey guys, it's Mort here, and thank you all so much for listening. I really appreciate that you guys listen to these videos, so thank you. It means the world to me that you enjoy my stories. If you enjoyed them though, you can let me know down below. Or just by liking, that's pretty nice too. I should have more stories with you over the weekend. Sorry for missing Tuesday, it's been a bit of a week. I also want to say if anyone has any stories from the US states that I put in the community post, I would really appreciate receiving them. I'm just going to read them out now. Montana, Wyoming, North Dakota, South Carolina, Virginia, West Virginia, Pennsylvania, Vermont and Maine, and Hawaii and Alaska. So if you have any stories from any of those states, please send them in, and I'll have this video done soon, hopefully. But until next time, take care, stay awesome, and I'll see you in the next one. Good night.